I want to welcome you back to Enemy of My Truth. And in this week's episode, Energy in the Workplace explores how we show up in our professional lives, the energy we carry, the presence we bring, and the ripple effect it creates within the spaces we work and lead. I'm so excited to welcome back the founding members of the Conversation for Men, Josh Verrill, Rosa, Chris DiSotto, and Ross Androchuk. Together, these four incredible gentlemen, along with my participation, have come together to form the Conversation for Men, a space designed to provoke meaningful questions, spark honest dialogue, and open the door to deeper understanding of self, spirituality, energy, and the connection in today's world. In this episode, they share their authentic reflections on how energy plays a role in the workplace, from leadership to communication to emotional awareness, and how this awareness has transformed not only their work, but their relationships and sense of purpose. Please join us for the next Conversation for Men live Zoom gathering on Thursday, November 13th at 6 p.m. You can register at andonnell.com and also learn more by visiting conversationformen.com. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. So I want to welcome today Josh Verrill, Rosa, Ross Androchuk, and Chris DiSotto. And today we're talking about spirituality in the corporate workplace and what that looks like for each of you, how that shows up and how it either defines you or how you've stepped into it just recently and how it continues to evolve. So I have questions for each of you, and I'm going to start with you, Josh. In a corporate environment that often prioritizes metrics, results, how have you been able to integrate your own spiritual, inward practices and energy awareness into your work? And what does that look like today, if you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, happy to. And I think to start, my corporate experience has been that of corporate America since I started working when I was 21 years old. So I've been embedded in it for now almost 20 years, I guess. And it's funny, it's not something I really thought about early in my career. It's not something talked about in corporate America. Spirituality, how you bring it to the workplace, where it shows up. More conversations about mental health, but there's no bridge to spirituality and where does that fit in the workplace? For me, certainly over the last, several years, it's become much more part of my practice. And, I've talked on this in the past with folks and publicly about how, this molding of the personal and professional self. And I think there is this evolution that's happening and starting to bring your full spiritual self to the workplace. While it may not be talked about, I do see more and more people willing to do it. And you can find individual conversations. And for me, it's a great opener is, hey, I'm Reiki certified. And all of a sudden people are like, you are? And like, it starts this whole conversation that we never otherwise would have had. So for me, it's about how I show up and the way that I bring the practices of spirituality with me into one-on-one conversations with my team, recognition of what it is that we're doing and how there's something so much greater at work. And it's an important piece, but it's not everything. So it allows me to sort of approach it with a clarity of mind. Ultimately, I do think it's had a positive impact on my mental health as a professional. I used to take work so seriously. It was everything. And while it still is very important to me, I'm now able to balance and I'm able to use the tools of whether it's a meditation or spiritual breathing or whatever the case may be to bring that perspective to it. And it allows me to show up better for my team, for the organization, and to bring hopefully a level of calm and understanding into the personal relationships that I have there.
Mm. Do you find, Josh, that as you're opening up, do you quietly witness other people wanting to go there with you and maybe not yet? Or you notice that as you hold space for that opening of just being authentically yourself, that you're seeing a shift in your own workplace or people around you slowly? Or do you think that there's more resistance to that? Like you see it, but they're just not there yet.
There's a little bit of both. So you can sort of drop a hint, and it's almost like fishing, right? You're like, am I gonna get is the hook gonna set? And in some cases, it's immediate, and people open up, and you find these the similarities in terms of how you think in the different practices. It could be as simple as yoga, and it takes you down that path, and then you drop the same hint or hook for somebody else, and it's a hard no, and there's just nowhere to go down that path. And it's almost like, oh, we're going to back that one up and we'll go back over here. We'll keep it corporate. So there's absolutely, as you get more willing to have some of those conversations, you can start to find those people who are actually, I think, yearning for it and looking for it, and they don't know how to have it. So it does open up, and it creates a better relationship with people at work when you can. So it's been really interesting. And this goes, for the last couple of years, but certainly over the last, one or two for me, I've seen it.
I love it. Great. I can really feel that too.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Chase, I'm going to invite this question to you. So, in a corporate environment that often prioritizes metrics and results, how have you been able to integrate your own spiritual practices and energy awareness into your work? And what does that look like every day showing up for yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, it's setting the energetic tone and foundation prior to the workday, and then that influences how I interact with my colleagues and approach my work. So, um, I start every day with a movement practice, depending on the day, whether that's a heavier workout or some light mobility and yoga, maybe some breath work and meditation, just something to like get me out of my head and ground me back into my body.
Mm.
As someone who's maybe a little bit more of an anxious person at baseline, just getting back into my body, kind of getting some energy out in the morning is super super important for me. Um, and on top of that, starting the day with like a gratitude journal, being grateful for what I have now. As someone who can be very, like I said, anxious about the future and wanting more, getting more. Okay, let's be grateful for what we have now. Um, so yeah, all of those practices have been super important for me. And then I take. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chase. No, go ahead.
Oh, and then just taking that grounded energy and then expressing it into my working hours. So what that looks like might be just like a calmer demeanor throughout the workday, whether I face like a tough client call, just handling that with, uh, like a calm presence, relaxed instead of kind of being defensive. Um, and if you get like an email that kind of surprises you or shocks you, I'll take like a deep breath before responding. So it can be little things like that.
Yeah, going inward that way. And would you say, if you look back now, when did you start establishing that practice for yourself?
I kind of had to learn the lesson from not doing it when I first got into corporate world. I worked in this, private equity, which is like 80 hours a week. And I was just like, after college, I was like ready to run through a wall. Like, I want to prove everyone that I can work this amount of hours and just crush it. And long story short, that did not work out. And I burnt myself out completely. And I realized I really needed to um, make sense of kind of what are my values and how much I did value my own health holistically. And I took a step back for a couple of years and all right, like what are the practices I need to establish if I were to go back into corporate for me to thrive, and what does that new job and career look like? So, establishing more of that self-awareness.
Fantastic. And I think it's honest too that, really it's just good old time and grit that allows us to become more aware of what we need to do to change. Like we can read all the books, we can, step into the teachings of other people, but I think we have to get, and we talked about it before we started the recording, that, real change doesn't happen until we get uncomfortable. We're forced to, somebody said somewhere, if I'm going to hopefully quote this correctly, that, frustration is the mother of invention or something along those lines. So it sounds like, Chase, too, that you gradually stepped into that space for yourself to be accountable for yourself, right? It's not the boss giving you that accountability to show up. It's not the coworker. It's not the partner. It sounds like you are establishing those practices to see yourself. And I think it's honest. And I think every day is not going to always be the same. Like just though we establish a practice and we can go inward doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And I think because it's not easy, those practices are just that much more important, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. So perfect. Chase, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Chris. So, hi, Chris. So glad you're here. So, in a corporate environment that often prioritizes metrics and results, how have you been able to integrate your own spiritual practices and inner energy awareness into your work? And what does that look like today?
Well, I think it's important to start out by saying that my corporate reality is a little different because, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. I worked in a corporate setting for about 3 years at one point, and that was an experience in my younger 20s. So for the most part, it's been small business, right? I have a very small team. We're very close, which is a different dynamic of sorts. But like you said, everything is driven on, creating profits, selling products, taking care of customers. And, over the last few years, really since I started working with you, that's when everything really started to, come together for me. And I started to look at things differently. So my presence in the day was different. I tried to create more awareness for myself, to actually sit and listen to my employees when they were talking about things and trying to be more collaborative and not trying to be the boss figure. Um, you know, and then over the last year or so, well, actually a couple of years, I started journaling in the morning. That was a huge thing. Um, doing my manifest journaling and some other types of journaling along the way, but just like stopping to pause and think about where I was at, where I wanted to be, how to get there, and learning to trust myself a little more. And then in the last probably 6 or 8 months, I've started doing the breath work in the morning, some meditation, and I switch it up. Sometimes I get off track and I know it because really to me it's not necessarily spirituality, it's energy. Right? I mean, energy is everything, everywhere, all around us. And once I started to get in tune with my inner self, I notice all the fluctuations in energy. I can pick it up from a customer on the phone. I can pick it up from my staff when I walk in the door. And I'm, I something that popped into my head listening to Josh talk was I there's a movie out there somewhere. I can't remember what it's called, but it was the CEO is this eccentric guy, and the executives would go into a meeting, and he'd be sitting in the corner. He had this like yoga, like meditation area, and he was off in his Zen space. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Don't interrupt. I'm not done yet." And then he'd come out, and he'd be like, "Okay, so now what's going on?" I think we're all going to do this, and you think it's crazy, but I sit in my office. I'll shut the door. I'll take 5 minutes to just kind of breathe and meditate and quiet my mind. Um, it helps with my stress levels. It helps me be a better boss. It helps me be more aware with everything that's going on around me, and it keeps me more grounded. So even when things happen that I can't control, I my mantra is, this is happening for me. It's terrible right now, but this is happening for me, and I just keep reminding myself. And so I think that's how I would say that it's more energy than necessarily what I would call spirituality that helps guide me through all of these things. And right now I'm in a big transition within the company, and it's what keeps me going. Really, I don't know how I would do it if I didn't have these practices and these this way of living.
Sure. Well, you said something, Chris, and it made me think about wanting to ask you this, that because you're an entrepreneur and you've owned your business, you've led people, you've been the boss.
Right.
So, did you ever find any struggle about how you show up for yourself in owning your alignment while also trying to lead and figuring out how to incorporate that? Was there a questioning or fear around being your authentic self, being the boss, and what that would represent?
Yeah, it's a real thing. It is something that weighs on your mind. And as I was transitioning, it was slowly creeping, and I could tell because my staff would ask me questions differently, or I could tell they wanted to talk to me about something, but they didn't want to come out and ask it. and we're a tight knit group. So it's, it's like a family, which is good and bad, right? But I was worried, like, what are they like? What if I'm in my office and someone, walks in and I'm taking 5 minute meditation, or, I'm playing solfeggio sounds to calm my mind. And it was interesting because it had the opposite effect. I think it was actually calming to them too,
Yeah.
because they could see that I was calmer in the way I was handling things. And so, like, well, what are you listening to in there? It's like, well, I'm listening to drumming sounds. you know,
Right.
it just but it was scary at first. I
Yeah.
thought they're going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I've lost my mind. I'm that guy sitting in the corner, But
Yeah.
but it surprises them because I'm me. I don't look like I don't have that stereotypical look of a guy that walks in like the baggy flowing pants and the scarf around his neck and, long
Right.
hair, like, oh, let's meditate. So
Well, we're changing the face of that, right? We are
absolutely.
saying like we all come from different walks and different experiences, that it can look differently and in
Right.
a very, for lack of a better term, normal way that we are operating. It's like we're changing our internal operating systems, but we're still
Mhm.
showing up. So, how do we bring the whole parts of ourselves to the job, including the way that we go inward and we really have that reflection? So,
Right.
love it, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for
You're welcome.
sharing.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Ann.
Ross, um, so glad you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
So, yeah. So, in a corporate environment that often prioritizes metrics and results, how have you been able to integrate your own spiritual practices and inner energy awareness into your work? And what does that look like today?
So, I've always had practices going back years that I can think of. A lot resonated with what Josh was saying in terms of corporate. That's all I've known. But I left corporate. I am no longer in that industry, as I know you guys are aware. And my main takeaway since leaving corporate is I've gotten so much time back that it's actually opened up doorways within me that I didn't know existed. Um, on a practice front, it really boils down to time for yourself, time to silence the mind and really disconnect. Worked for a pharmaceutical company, extremely, extremely demanding at times. I mean, I can recall projects working 30 days straight, continuous, just grinding. And that was the mentality I had. You work your ass off. That way with great work ethic, which is awesome in one suit, can also be your downfall. Just again boils down to leaving work at work and not taking it at home, and making time to have those practices, no matter what they may look like, whether it's meditation, breath work, or even like I would consider my earlier practices going back 10, 15 years ago, just going to the gym, having that energetic release at the gym. It doesn't necessarily need to be the actual, like what so many I think would classify spirituality as like yoga, breath work. It doesn't need to be that. It could be a simple, a walk, whatever it does to just, compartmentalize your mind from that workspace.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And you brought up something around time. So, I want to go there with you because I have found it in for myself that there is guilt, and this is my own work, about allowing time to go inward sometimes, that you have the time to go inward and to
Yeah.
find that time. And did you struggle with that at all, Ross, stepping into your practices today and how you're showing up in terms of balancing time for yourself and knowing how important it is for the end result of what you're trying to do too, especially through work?
Yeah. I could say that's still, a work in progress. There are days that if my calendar or my schedule's open, which it is for the most part, like I'm like, I should be doing something. Like you have that mentality, like I got to be doing something. But I've definitely had the time to reflect now where I'm like, whoa, wait, this is purposeful for me to go inward, to reflect, to do that inner work. And that just goes back to what I said. It has opened up doorways I didn't know existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you also bring up something about about how we make time for ourselves. It doesn't have to be this 20-minute, get into a meditative pose. You could have all the lights dimmed. It's really just taking, 5 minutes out of your day to go step outside, to go take a simple
Exactly.
walk, right? To just be with yourself, go sit in the car by yourself. What
Yeah.
does that look like for each of us? So it's that expectation that it's got to be this whole production, and it really doesn't, because those little moments for ourselves do add up. Finding that balance. So thank you, Ross. Thanks for
Of course.
sharing. Yeah. Josh, I'm going to come back to you with both of these questions. That way we know that you have to get off the call for a meeting. So I'm going to kind of hit you with both of these questions. That way, when you do have to scoot, we've heard from you. So, second question. How has being mindful of your personal energy and spiritual grounding, whatever that looks like, helped you navigate challenges, lead teams, or influence, company culture in your own businesses and those that you work with others? And what guidance would you share with someone trying to harness their own energy in a similar way in the workplace?
So leave it to corporate America to have a specific call that I have to get to at a specific time. Um, and we've just talked about so many fun things, a lot of really interesting comments made. And I'm going to get to your question, Ann, but I did want to add, Chase, you talked about it. Ross, you brought it back up in terms of, whether it's corporate America or just the American culture, we glorify the grind. Right. It's like the harder you work, the more successful you are. You come out of college. I did the same thing, Chase, and I put my head down and I was driving to Boston 5 days a week. I was leaving the house at 5:30. I was getting home at 8 p.m. And that was where I found my self-worth, was in the grind. And then as you sort of mature and move through your career, maybe introduce some spirituality, you start to have this conversation with yourself around, well, what and who am I grinding for? Right. I've been very successful over the course of my career. I have made many people very wealthy. I'm still working. Right. So like there comes this balance. And I think that's one of the things to your question, and about energy is how you show up with that recognition of where you place it and how you can bring the very best version of yourself to your professional, whether it's a career, whether it's as an entrepreneur, your own business, because it needs that from you. But if you're just there to work, it's not going to get the very best of you. And I think that translates into how you lead a team. If I show up and I'm just in absolute go mode, and I'm not looking for signals of people who might need help, might need assistance. Maybe their mental health they don't have the work-life balance that they need. I lose sight of that, then everyone suffers. And it's really important to me that as we show up as a team, we're able to bring the right level of energy to it. It's also completely changed the dynamic of my one-on-ones with my team. In the past, it was very much a checklist of what are we doing? What hasn't been done, what needs to be done, and what are we doing to drive the business forward? There's still some of that, but we always start with the how are you doing? How are we doing? Where do we need to focus our time? I have a not so corporate view on leading a team, and I've said throughout my career that I think sometimes the organizations I work for don't love, but that is that the teams that I have the pleasure and opportunity to lead, I recognize that they're not going to retire as a member of my team at this organization that I'm at. My job, while they are with me, is to give them skills, learning, and experiences that they can take somewhere else and go do more great stuff. And I just want it to align with whatever they want to be when they grow up. And I said it at 20, 30, 40, and I'll say it at 50, because we're all still trying to figure this out as we go. And in that is trying to help them connect with their own, they may not realize it, but their own spirituality and energy for where are they their best and how can I help? Knowing that at some time they're going to come to me and say, hey, I've got a great offer and I have to go. And I'll say, yes, you do, because you're ready. And that will feel really good and we'll celebrate that. So bringing that energy to a workplace where in the past it has been all about the organization. And I think that's a really, really interesting concept. And Chris, the name of that movie is on the tip of my tongue. I saw it too, and it is so anti-corporate when you're like, okay, he's meditating before making a big decision. I forget the decision. So I'll end with this. There was something that I had read that really resonated with me. And the CFO says to the CEO, "What if we invest in training our people, and then they leave. And the CEO looks back to the CFO and says, well, what if we don't and they stay? So for me, there's this investment in your people that is so critical. And I think that that's sort of where the most healthy of myself showing up for them is what they need. And that actually becomes my number one priority for them.
I love that. And, you bring up the subject of awareness. And I think we could even change and talk about corporate awareness, right? Corporate energy awareness. And it's awareness in our everyday life, but it's almost allowing others around you to be aware of people in their environment. Because if we're aware of how someone's showing up to work, how they're feeling, I mean, imagine going into a Monday meeting and saying, hey, Sue, can you look across the table at Bob and what do you, does he seem like he's in a good mood or not? Can you just look at him and see him for the person that he is? I mean, imagine holding space in a corporate setting or at the job site that we're not looking at the metrics, the results, what we're producing, but we're looking at the individuals. And how much more would that invest in the energy of what we do create? What comes out of that? And you, Josh, talking about that, really encouraging that and supporting that. And I think the big piece is giving ourselves and giving others permission, especially you leading a team, being a leader. They look to that. You're changing the whole energy feel. And I guess I want to ask you one thing. Have you felt resistance from somebody who perhaps might be in the team itself, or how would you deal with someone that had resistance to not really wanting to go there, not wanting to hold space for how you're feeling or how they're doing? Like, how would you step into resistance that way with somebody?
Yeah, there has been resistance over the many different roles that I've had, and in some cases, it's resistance where there's no breaking through. Now it's I don't want to say it's a prerequisite on one of my teams, but I think that the people that I look for and hire and the people that join my teams sort of all have that level of openness to a certain degree. Where it's been more challenging is as I look across the quote unquote aisle. Right? I work in marketing and sometimes in sales. It's we have different approaches often, and that's probably where I felt the greatest friction. Where any meeting is very down to business. What are we doing to make sure that I hit my quota, to make sure that we drive these sales? Understandably so. They've got a lot of attention on them, whether it's from the board, the CEO, or whatever. But you can always find something. If you want to, you can always find an interest. You can always find a likeness that will open up just the slightest bit of a conversation, and then you can start to carve through the layers of the onion because it's there. And ultimately, we are all human inside the workplace. A lot of people just bring to work what they believe the workplace wants from them versus bringing who they are and knowing that the workplace will celebrate that more. Because in the past, workplaces haven't celebrated it the way they need to. I want it all. You see slivers of it, but I like to find it,
Yeah.
and then really pull it out when I can.
Well, yeah, that just adds to that we're first and foremost, we are human. We're allowed to be human and to be perfectly imperfect. And that means even that emotional way that we show up and mentally within the workforce. And if we're at our work or in our job 80% of the time, I mean, it's even more important to acknowledge that and to show up and be like, bring your very human self to Monday's meeting, please. Like that's the homework. Tell me all the things that didn't go your way this weekend and let us know a little bit more of that sliver, that slice of the humanness that you are. Like that brings connection and relatability. So thank you. And then the last question, Josh. Let's see. So looking back, what have you learned about letting spirituality, but more so this self-awareness of your energy guide your career decisions? And what key insights or piece of advice would you offer to others seeking to bring more of themselves into the corporate space or just starting out?
Yep. And so the first thing I'll say is you just triggered a thought. So I'm gonna say it so that I don't forget it too, which is I don't have built into my agendas those types of conversations, right? They naturally come about when we start our team calls, but I don't actually have a 20-minute session when we kick off our team meeting of, okay, how is everyone? Let's everyone check in. Tell me about your weekend. What was hard? What was great? What was so I'm going to add that. moving forward. That's going to be a part of our regular check-in. As I look back, I think some of the most important lessons that I've learned that I wish I could pass along to my 20-year-old self and to any others out there who are working their way through college thinking about professional career. The first is um, it it cannot be about the money. It cannot be about the title. I've chased them, I've made it, and I was just as satisfied in my career when I was making $32,000 a year and driving into Boston. Essentially, it felt like, paying them to go to the office. But I was learning and I was around people and I was exhilarated by what I was doing. And then over the course of my career, I've made more, and it comes and it goes, and it's really got to be about the fulfillment of the position and the fulfillment of the role. So take time as you move through school and as you come into your career to try different things. And that's where, I would say the first part of my life, let's say until I was maybe even more recently, 38, 39, 40, it was a lot about that title, right? Whether it was the chief of or the VP of, and did it come with equity, and could I turn it into to wealth? And more recently, it's become much more about what does the product do? Is it doing good for more people than just another software product that's helping companies make more money? I need that connection both to the product, but also to the people that use it or to the impact that it has. And that's more of who I am. And it gives me more of a purpose-driven work. And it makes showing up day after day a whole lot easier. And while, B2B marketing may not be the absolute love of my life in terms of what I do, the fact that I can connect with the people in the product is really important, and it's changed a little bit of how I show up on a day to day. So I think the most important advice is, take the time to try many things and figure out where you're connected from that purpose perspective. And then you'll show up differently, and you'll be surrounded by people who feel similarly to you, and that will feel really good.
I love that. I love that. And what I'm also hearing too is maybe it's a part of finding that balance of bringing your human self. Like there should be this question: how human were you this weekend? Like, how human are you? And the parts of ourselves that are vulnerable and that are figuring it out and fumbling. And the more we fumble, the more we become aware. Like you cannot have one without the other.
Mhm.
And it's part of that raw vulnerability that we encourage. So maybe part of that person starting out, that, 20-year-old or 22-year-old out of school, you find a job where you are going to learn some grit. You've got to just go through the motions, but eventually it's really about not only what you're learning, but how you feel when you go to work. Like,
Yeah, totally. And I think you just triggered a thought around, and AI is going to change a lot of how we work. Most of us, if not all of us. And as you say that, like that, stay human and find ways to connect as human. I'll finish with this. I was just over the weekend, I was watching a beautiful sunset over a lake in New Hampshire. And I took a picture of it. And in that moment, I thought, AI will never be able to do that. It might be able to do a lot of our jobs, and it might be able to do a lot of things, but it will never recreate a sunset that we watch with our own eyes. And that's the human experience. And that's what, we have to make sure that we continue to connect both personally and professionally at that human level, or else, it'll be hugely detrimental, I think, to a lot of people's mental health. So it's really important. I love
mm,
that.
and that's
What
just
you said.
you investing time in yourself. It's like the sunset factor. Get your sunset in, whatever that looks like. It's you spending time with yourself, that nothing can be given to you, or it's not a project. It's what you give to yourself. And I love that, Josh.
Yeah.
And it's important to stay there while you're building and stepping up that ladder a bit, to look around at the sunset behind you as you're
Yeah.
climbing that. So thank you. And I know you're gonna stay on here for a bit and listen, but thank you for sharing a bit of your perspective and your awareness and your journey. Every time that I get to talk to you and all of you here, it's just an honor to have you share a bit about what you go through and to offer that to others. So thank you,
Yeah.
Josh.
Thank you, Anne. And I think it's so important. And hopefully people listening will say, you know what, I'm gonna think about how I bring spirituality to the workplace. And if just one person thinks that way, then we've done our job today, haven't we? I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Josh. Couldn't agree more. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right, Chris. Actually, no, I'm going to go down to Chase. I'm going to keep this in order. So, Chase, let's see. How has being mindful of your personal energy and spiritual grounding help you navigate challenges, lead teams, or influence company culture? And what guidance would you share with someone trying to harness their own energy in a similar way?
In terms of navigating challenges and tough situations, I think for me, it's been building an awareness and practice of recognizing that I can't always control the situation or the circumstances, or many times I can't, but I can control how I respond to it. Whether that's, like I mentioned before, a frustrated client, or maybe more macro, like corporate restructuring and there are layoffs happening, or a shocking email I receive, being able to react and respond to those in a grounded state and grounded perspective, I have found to be super powerful and an energy saver as well. Not being so like anxiety or letting kind of my emotions get the better of me. And I think that can rub off on colleagues as well. They might get a little curious. Maybe there's another way to respond to things. I had a colleague come into my office the other day. He was like, Chase, like, how are you so calm, like, with these things? And I was like, hey, if you ever want to like talk about like how like I actually kind of, I don't know, became this way, or I don't know if that's the right word, but how I like show up in this way, like happy to have that conversation. He's not taking me up on that yet, but I am hopeful, fingers crossed. And in terms of guidance, a lot of this has been practice, honestly. And I think on top of that, asking myself, how do I want to show up for others at work? Like, what are the qualities and characteristics that I want to embody? And how would that person perform the duties of my role, that's asked of me? So asking myself those questions, has been very influential and becoming, I guess, who I am at work today and how I'm showing up.
Yeah, you mentioned something about things that we can't control, and isn't that, it's so very human of us. And I really want to go to that term because I feel like it's very fitting, because I think we're forced to just be in that human state, robotic, like this is what you got to do. And one of the things that came to mind when you were talking about, controlling the outcome and what we're doing, is that the only thing that we can rely on is that everything changes. And perhaps if we go into those that are trying to get into the workforce and get into that new corporate job, or that we're there now, what if there's a huge disclaimer at the workplace, like at the door, like it's okay to change. It's okay to outgrow this position. It's okay to come here for what you need and to say, you know what, I think I'm moving on, whether it's the energy of the people that you're working with that's changed, the work itself is not challenging you, whatever it is, maybe it's the pay. But what if the culture within our workplace was about, it's okay to change your mind and to change, like we encourage it. And imagine what that would do to allow people not to stay stuck at a job that they have outgrown. So when you talk about how do we control this, how about just the essence that it's, hey, I invite change every day to my life, and we'll see what that looks like. So just another Monday morning note.
Yeah, and that exact thing happened to me. I started at a new company about 4 months ago, and I realized after 3 years at my past company that as much of these practices that I had been doing, the breathwork, the meditation, the exercise, the movement in the morning, like, was, and how calm I could be during the workday, it was not going to change the misalignment that I was beginning to feel in that current company and my role. And I was like, okay, now is the time that I need to change. This is no longer in alignment for me, and it, very likely is probably not going to get any easier or better. I just better for me and for my own kind of mental health moving forward. So let's make a change. And I did. And, it's a lot better where I am now. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that just reminds me, like, you can almost have this flow chart. Like, are you happy in your job? No. Do you feel guilt? yes, okay, you got to back up. Like they have this flow chart. Like if you're feeling guilt and that's recognized in the workspace. I mean, imagine having an HR person you go to like, I'm feeling guilty. She's like, oh, come on in. Let's talk about that. Let's explore that because maybe this is not the right fit. But you talking about that, even your breath work, Chase, I can see you instituting that like at a morning meeting or like, hey, to the company, like, hey, can we do some breath work for 5 minutes and maybe somebody will take it and run with it, but at least it's a tool that the business supports as a way to just calm yourself at your desk or whatever you need. So thank you for sharing a bit about how you've stepped into this and you just recently going through that transition as well and feeling that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Chris. How has being mindful of your personal energy and spiritual grounding, however that looks, helped you to navigate challenges, lead teams, or influence company culture? And what guidance would you share with someone trying to harness their own energy in a similar way?
It's so one of the things when I started journaling that I would write about myself is that I wanted to be more responsive, not reactive, which sounds very simple, but it's complicated because the daily factors, the outside factors that come in, it forces you to make snap judgments sometimes or snap decisions, um, and so I think one of the biggest things for me is that it's helped me calm myself. So when things happen, or like when Chase talks about like the email, um, email is the bane of my existence because anyone can hide behind their screen and send an email, and the connotation, the way you read it, it's sometimes you can snap the judgment about it, and so I find that like just calming myself and being aware of you know what is important to me, it allows me to respond in a way that is meaningful, that they might not see coming, and that allows me to feel good about what I'm doing and how I'm interacting with people. That goes with my staff too. I try to really sit and listen to them and give them the space. Um, it's hard in the course of a day because there's a lot of moving parts. Things move fast sometimes, and so it's become important for me to find my quiet, find my inner self, and talk to myself, um, to kind of take a pulse sometimes, and then to also do that with my staff. So, I only have a couple of employees now. I've scaled back from like 6 or 7 to now there's basically two and a half of us. And so it's really important for me to have everybody in a good space. And so things will get crazy. I can tell that people are overwhelmed. I can feel it. I might not even be in the building and I can feel it. And so I'll walk in the door and I'll say, why don't you go for a walk outside and just take a few minutes to, go a couple laps around the building. Oh, but can I do that? I'm like, absolutely, go ahead. I'll watch the phones, and then they come in and they're just completely different, right? It's that little reset. And so I think my own awareness has helped me be a better boss, a better, teammate, and a leader in a lot of ways. And I employ that in other groups and things that I'm involved with. And um, it's funny because I listen a lot more. I don't feel the need to talk so much. And so, and I've noticed old patterns that'll kind of creep in sometimes, and I'm like, oh, there it is. Nope, I'm not doing that today. And then I'll catch myself and I'll reset. And I think I just think it's important for anyone, to stay true to themselves, to be authentic. It doesn't matter whether you're in a corporate environment, whether you're in a small business, whether you're coaching a soccer team. Um, it's important to be you, because it doesn't matter how anyone else perceives you to be or whatever. And I've noticed since I started showing up as me, the authentic Chris, that people respond very differently to me. And the opportunities and the things that come to me because of that I attract are so much more powerful and so much more meaningful. And to talk like, to use Josh's term, fulfilling, right? Um, and even in my business right now with things that are like completely upside down and, change is everywhere, from, the ground up to the top. It's allowing me to stay focused and to realize that, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that, I'm not a believer that you have to work 80 hours a week to be successful. I want to work like maybe 5 hours a week and be successful. And so that's what I'm trying to like shift. And I know it's possible. There's plenty of people that do that. And so it's it's just about staying true to yourself and trusting yourself and what is important to you.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you mentioned something about, listening more. And I think that's something for myself included, that it's always that's a constant place to what else can I hear? Because by listening and being in that space to lead, you are allowing that person to know that what they have to share, whether whether it can be followed through, it can happen, there can be changes, that they're heard, they're seen. And isn't that what we're all about? Whether we're in the workplace or we're personally in our lives, that it's about being seen and knowing that the individual is showing up in that way. I had a client who, when you talk about writing in your journal, Chris, for their business, that they actually gave out journals to all their employees. And part of their work, which is really cool, was for the employees to write in that journal about work. And it had to be about whether you were happy with something or not. And they were invited the next week to share in their journal at the meeting. And whether that stuff was incorporated, changed, it was talked about, it was actually written down. And there was a collective of energy of everybody hearing something that needed to change, or they were in a safe space to share, like, I have been feeling this way about my work. And this was started like on their meetings, that, it's journal time. And so whether you just doodled in it or you started to write, the journal was a permission piece to say, listen, how are you feeling about your job?
Mm-hmm.
And it allowed them a space, whether they shared it or not, to just reflect. So it reminds me of you talking about writing in your journal and how important that is. And we'll probably have another podcast all about journaling. And it doesn't have to be this laborious thing, but it's about putting your energy to paper and affirming and making things come to fruition.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it really is true that, like Tony Robbins loves to say, where thoughts go, energy flows.
Yes.
And it's true. Thoughts have power beyond anything you can imagine. And so putting the pen to paper, that just adds the other element to solidify it.
And I also just want to add, lastly, that, we can't afford not to. So whatever that looks like, whether you're getting out for a walk, you're thinking, you're meditating. What I love about writing, whether it's just a simple sentence or a word to yourself, it's evidence. I say date whatever you write
Right.
down, because it's evidence and a timeline for yourself that you can reflect back on to watch your progress. So really cool stuff, Chris. Thank you.
Extremely powerful. Yeah.
Very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ross, so how has being mindful of your personal energy and spiritual grounding help you navigate challenges, lead teams, or influence company culture? And what guidance would you share with someone trying to harness their own energy in a similar way?
So I'll touch more on the guidance piece, because it just kind of resonates in a sense that I know and I knew when I was at corporate. People are your greatest resources. Putting in the time with them individually or the team plays dividends. It's literally an investment. So I always view it. Also knowing there's enough relates to having a side and understanding like the process of planning, what goes into it, to be accomplished in the current schedule and what's out of reach. So it's really just like again, taking time with a particular individual. I always thought one-on-one was the best. To learn with him to the field, walk down the system. It's the corporate mentality of that, here's an SOP, figure it out, really doesn't work in my opinion. It works for some, but not all. And I think it boils down to that one-on-one time and investing in the individual.
Yeah, that one-on-one time too. It almost feels as though there's this scarcity around that one-on-one time, like we can't afford that human connection, almost, that it's a rarity.
Because you're going to become vulnerable maybe and understand that you don't know. And guess what? None of us fucking know, to be point blank. Like we don't know, and it's okay to admit, but we don't admit it because that's like whoa, I'm supposed to know this. No, 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 no. It's okay that you don't. Let's go through this. That's like part of what work is figuring it out.
And encouraging it. Like, I guess those in that leadership position, like, tell me, like, I lead a team and it's so important in my business. Like, tell me how you feel, what's working, what's not working, but to have that transparency, because, the transparency translates into who you are when you leave the job as well. So, if we're
Yeah.
creating that transparency of authenticity, and again, there's that vulnerability in the workplace. And just to add on to what you said, I think it all comes down to, Ross, what you're saying is just awareness. Like, are we allowed to be aware of how we feel in the workplace? Are we allowed to be aware of how other people feel around us and how we are feeling every day in our job? And for me as an employer, it's really important that I check in with my people. Like, hey, how are you feeling? Like, how's that going? How do you feel in alignment with this person that we're working with in the team? How is it feeling? Because that matters. And when it's suppressed and when it's silenced, there's no good that comes out of that. It creates the health of the whole environment and the culture of the work. So, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Cancer in the environment is what it is. Cancer culture.
No.
It's what is one to stand with it.
Well, also it should be a requirement when you're hiring somebody. Like, listen, we require vulnerability. We require you to be so imperfectly, perfect in the humanness of who you are, that vulnerability and transparency is a must. Empathy, like, and if you're not sure what those things are, just be curious enough to jump on board to find out that it's a non-negotiable. So,
We need to read that corporate America needs to read this, because we do necessarily showing empathy. And I'm not here to coddle, but there is a balance that I think we, as like a whole, a collective, can certainly step back at and do a lot better at.
oh, definitely, because the parts are greater than the whole, and if the parts are not energetically feeling recognized, aligned, or feeling good energetically, it's going to affect the whole. So,
Exactly.
so just to kind of put that, but thank you, Ross, for sharing that. It's good stuff. Okay, Chase, I'm going to come back down to you for final question. Looking back, what have you learned about letting spirituality and self-awareness guide your career decisions? And what key insights or piece of advice would you offer to others seeking to bring more of themselves into the corporate space? And I'm also going to add on to that, if you want to add this, like, how would you have stepped in differently, for you, like, 7, 8, 10 years ago versus today?
Yeah, it sounds cliche, but trusting your gut and intuition is super important. There will likely be a lot of, I guess, external forces, family, friends, Google, etc., influencing you regarding like your career, like what should be my next job or whatever, whatever the case may be. I just think at the end of the day, just do what feels right. Which I recognize can be really, really tough. But I've never made a bad decision from a grounded, like present, energetic state too. And in terms of advice, I think you'd likely be very surprised at what happens when you start to express more of yourself in your career and work. Going back to like my new job in my career, I put on my resume, like at the very bottom of interests, I put, astrology, yoga, and I just threw it out there. And I get this interview at my current company, and the COO who I was interviewing with, she's like, "Oh, I saw you. You like astrology and yoga. I like love astrology. I read like birth charts, etc." I was like, "Oh, the COO and CFO of like a financial services firm is like really into this stuff. There's probably something to this of like really putting yourself out there and then attracting other people who share that same thing." So it did take some time, years of me being confident enough to I guess do that, but the payoffs were huge. So yeah, it's going to be scary, but I think putting all of yourself out there is going to create big shifts for you. And in terms of what I would tell myself, like, 5-10 years ago, and I think I'd be honest, I think I needed to make those mistakes in order to grow and kind of learn these lessons. I don't know if the 22-year-old self who was kind of looking forward to the weekend and drinking and getting, kind of that work hard, play hard mentality would have really, I guess, listened. So I will say, I think the just kind of lifetime and kind of making those mistakes, at least for me, was what I needed to, I guess, yeah, become who I am now and continuing to grow into.
Mm. And it's honest too, Chase, right? You are just, inviting all of us to listen to that, step into the workplace, step into those jobs. We're going to have many jobs that allow us to see ourselves in a more clear light. We're going to have disappointments with our job, but I believe that that's the grit that grows us to want something more when the priorities start to change. And it's not about the weekends, but it's about how you see yourself and how you want to show up. And I think time can only give us that. And also, you spark my mind because I know Josh, I'm excited you get to stay on. So glad you're still here. But, working with Josh and Heather in their business, there's something to be said about bringing intuition and using that intuitive muscle in the workplace and encouraging it. Like, how do you use your intuition to problem solve? Like, what a valuable tool to have and to not have to hide behind, but to say, yeah, I bring that to the job. Like, that's one of my strengths. I'm very intuitive. Well, tell me more. I mean, what a superpower to come in and have an employer be like, you like astrology? Check. You're intuitive. Well, all right, you're high. Like, here we go. Let's see how we do. So there's just this piece of stepping into work, figuring out who you are, learning to fail a couple times because we need to, because we figure out more of who we are, and bringing that intuitive part to yourself and authenticity, which is what you're sharing too. So I appreciate that, Chase. Thank you. Thank you for sharing and sharing a part of your journey of which brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Chris, let's see here. So, looking back, what have you learned about letting spirituality and that inner self awareness energy guide your career decisions, and what key insights or piece of advice would you offer to others seeking to bring more of themselves into the corporate workspace?
I mean, I wish I knew then what I know now. I mean, if I look back at different things that I've done over the years, I wouldn't have stayed as long. I would have, been looking at things very differently. The one corporate setting that I was in for several years, like I looking back at it and thinking about it as everyone's talking today, I mean, it was so unhealthy. And I think back on how I felt trapped. You're never trapped. There's always opportunities, and it's about, being open and trusting that, the right things are going to come to you at the right time. And I just, boy, I mean, I could have cleared my mind. I wouldn't have had as much tension or anxiety every day. I probably would have been more effective in what I was trying to do. And and I think that's the biggest takeaway. The takeaway is, don't be afraid. Just be yourself, and don't ever feel like you're stuck or scared. Or, I think in corporate America, people get accustomed to the money, and that's what ends up driving them. And they think, oh, I just have to keep doing this but the money's going to come. Money's just energy, and there's an infinite amount of it. I know I've been told I was crazy when I say that out loud, but it's true. And so I think it's, make sure you're doing things for the right reasons. And if you're always doing things for the right reasons, everything's going to work itself out.
Love that. And you brought back you said something right in the beginning there about trusting yourself, and I think that is such an important piece for all of us about how we trust ourselves, because if we don't really line up with that true north inside of ourselves, we really go to work every day in working for somebody else, for something else. We're not aligning with who we are. And there's nothing worse than like not trusting yourself to be at a job that you just don't feel good to be in, right? Like And I think it's also about checking in, like, are you feeling good to be at your job? Like checking in every week, every month. And imagine that being on an annual review. How do you feel to be here? Like asking the person, like, is it feeling good? Well, it's really not, but tell me why. Like maybe let's explore, why does it not feel aligned? I'm bored with the work. I don't love the mental emotional environment of the office. I don't love my schedule. Like just be honest. And so as you're saying that, Chris, some advice that I'm hearing from you is really learning to trust yourself, which is not easy for any of us, whether
very
it's
difficult.
in the workplace or personally. And also just really following the feeling, because the feeling that we feel is the emotion that creates our vibration at any given time. And so you're constantly checking in with, like, how are you feeling, and not suppressing it, not denying it. Because if we're not feeling emotionally connected to the work, that money flow will not be what we need it to be, right? Because it's matching that energy. So it's important, the things that you're sharing, especially around the writing and trusting yourself. And it's a work in progress for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Chris, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ann.
Thank you for sharing. Ross, looking back, what have you learned about letting spirituality and self awareness guide your career decisions, and what key insights or piece of advice would you offer to others seeking to bring more of themselves authentically into the corporate space?
Yeah. So, excuse me. Um, Knowing what I know now, quite frankly, I wouldn't also know that there's pros and cons to everything. But I mean, that's in retrospect. That's having lived through it, to understand. Um, and if I was still there today, I think my role would be different. I was definitely no. I do recall I was known as being a grounded individual, which I do feel still resonates. But don't stress over it. It is not worth it at all. None of us, from you know the low scale jobs all the way up to like the CEO, COO, CFO, whoever you want to, whatever the title may be, it's not worth the stress. It's not worth to take it home. I mean, I first-handedly been in some situations that were stressful, no doubt, from a financial standpoint. And people are like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, because it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, progress is important, but this ultimately doesn't matter. The financial piece, like, we'll figure it out. We always have, we always will. So don't take it home with you.
Yeah. And, that you bring up that whole point of, like, it doesn't matter, because we realize, like, how much time do we invest at our job? If you really look at that, it becomes our identity. It becomes such an aspect of ourselves we no longer recognize because we're in survival.
Some people need, like, I actually recall having conversations with my directors and certain leaders. You spend more time with the people you work with than your own family. And when you step back and think about that, that's a WTF. We're like, wait, what? Um, so again, be sure you like them. Be sure you're fulfilled by what you do for a living. It just, yeah.
And yeah, and it's not about you're taking the job because so and so thinks it's a good idea. Like, you'd be crazy not to take it. It checks all these boxes, which is what we hear, that the noise and commotion around us, like the reason we have to do it. And yes, for many of us, you have to take a job because you have to support your family, you have to live. So I don't want to take away from that. But that being said, over time, can we graduate into a space of, on a feeling factor, an indication, how does it feel? And sometimes we don't know how it feels until we're in the job, and then like 6 months later we're like, this was the wrong choice. And you're okay
Yeah.
to say it was the wrong choice, because maybe you still had to go to that job to figure out it wasn't the right feel, and not being locked in for the next 5 years, giving yourself that permission to get really honest. And so, it's incorporating the work that you do. Can you love it too? Can it feel good? And it should. We're all entitled to that. And maybe this encourages somebody who does lead a team, that does have a business, to think differently the way they show up, in creating a team that wants to be there and saying, hey, how are you? And how does that feel? That small bit of investment of checking in and being aware. Maybe it's the new monthly Monday awareness meetings. Like, let's check into awareness and how we're doing. But I appreciate that, Ross, and your perspective with that and the honesty of how you stepped into that and how you see it today. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
I want to thank Josh, Chris, Chase, and Ross for holding this conversation, for really your truth from each of you, each of your perspectives, which is so helpful. And I hope that this reaches whoever needs to hear it. And I also want to add that as we're having these conversations, I want to invite one of you to maybe share a little bit about the conversation for men and talking a bit about what you guys are bringing together, especially just coming into this fall. Again, want to talk a bit about holding these conversations with vulnerability and allowing it to happen, as we're hopefully going to be holding some of these monthly gatherings on Zoom for others to come together to speak. But does anybody here want to share a little bit about what you're creating and what's been kind of in the works and stepping more into?
I'm happy to take a pass at that, Anne. As you mentioned, I got to stay on, which was great. I've really enjoyed listening to the conversation. I had so many thoughts, and yes, that was a pun intended with the conversation. As we've listened from Chase, Chris, and Ross, great stories. Thank you guys for sharing. The conversation for men has been born from sessions that we started over the last several months, where we invited other men to come together with us. You there to help guide. Thank you. And just to have the real vulnerable conversations. And what we realized was that we're not the only ones who feel the way we feel and want to have conversations about what it is, and the energy work and the spirituality. There are others out there, and they're plumbers, they're electricians, they're in corporate America, as we've discussed, but they're just real men, and there isn't an outlet for that conversation to happen. And it feels like, there is this persona we're supposed to embody, and all of that gets stripped apart when we come together. And I think the four of us, with yourself, felt that there's a bigger thing here, that to be able to bring a podcast, to be able to bring a website, and continued group meetings for other men like ourselves to come and welcome that vulnerability and have those conversations is needed in today's, let's call it, chaotic world, whether it's professional, political, personal, all the P's. So we continue we've been recording podcasts. It's been a ton of fun. We hope folks will listen. We think they'll really enjoy it when they do. And it's just, it's a really, really cool project. And we get to connect with some other like-minded men, which is really great.
Yeah, I'm so excited for the four of you and the space that you're holding and what that's going to, unfold for others, and looking forward into the next year of holding hopefully some in-person retreats and gatherings so we can be in person to meet, but reaching remotely as well, and creating the conversations, creating simply connection that can have a ripple effect in each other's lives, which then has a ripple effect beyond that into their lives with others. So I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the perspective again, and the four of you creating this space for others to step forward. And I just love watching it come together, and honored and grateful for each of you. So thank you. And I will put all of the information in the show notes as well. Again, thank you for being here, sharing a bit of yourselves and your piece of how you step into the workplace and your journey with it. It means so much.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you,
Anne.
Thank you. Take care. Okay.